Right, welcome back everyone to Jface Games. Today I'm talking about this game, Break. I had seen the Kickstarter way back when, and then to be honest, what turned me on to this was I watched the Dave Thaumator video, and then I watched Ben Milton over on Questing Beast, and it was the layout. They kept going on and on about the layout, and since I'm in the midst of designing a game, and I'm in layout mode, I was really interested in seeing what was the big deal about this layout? Like why was it so great? Now, obviously, I saw it in their videos, but I wanted to see it firsthand, right? I wanted to see it in my hands, and then I just wanted to know, of course, because this is what the nature of this channel is how does it play? What's the mechanics? And there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. So we're gonna go through this in my sort of typical format. But the nice thing is that this game actually provides some fabulous appendices that break down all the mechanics of all the major aspects of the game. So we're going to kind of walk through those. All right. So that's my notes. Here we go. So the game basics, starting with resolution system. It's a D20 system, but it has some interesting concepts here, right? Mainly that you have a D20 and it's a roll under your what's referred to as your aptitude, which would be like your attribute. So what you're trying to do there is you're just trying to roll under it, right? So if you have I'm just going to make up numbers. If you have a 12 in might, then if you roll a d20 and you get a 12 or lower, congratulations, you just succeeded. A special success is when you hit your aptitude. So if I have a 12 in might, if I roll a 12, that's my kind of special success, or maybe you could call it a crit, but that's your special success. Now, that's what happens when you're doing what would be referred to as a check, right? The check is you are rolling against your sort of attribute. And there's ways to modify it. We'll talk about this in a second. But there's other ways of rolling. And we're going to get into contests and things like that in a second. But I just want to bring this up at the beginning. But if you're making an attack roll is a d20 roll high system. So in that scenario, you're going to take the d20 and you're going to try and roll higher than the enemy defense. So there's a flip, right? There's an inversion. Sometimes you want your d20 rolling low. Sometimes you want your d20 rolling high. And I don't have a problem with that, right? I think that's a choice that's made in different games. It's usually not done for confusion's sakes. The thing that I think is interesting is that one of the things you have in this game is you have bonuses, right? So you have edges and snags, which edges and snags are in essence your advantage, disadvantage, your banes or boons, that kind of thing, right? You're rolling twice and taking the better. But you have bonuses in this game, and major and minus bonuses are +2 or +4, and you have to invert those depending on the scenario. So I get a +2, +4 when I'm making an attack. But technically, a bonus, I believe, is therefore a -2, -4 if I'm making it check, because I actually want to get lower than my result. So that's a very odd thing to me, right? So a bonus is added when trying to roll high numbers, but subtracted when trying to roll low. That might be, who knows? I haven't played yet, but from a design perspective, that seems weird. It seems weird that you'd be doing that, but it might play very smoothly. Because the nice thing is, hopefully it's very basic math. But I thought that was interesting. And the same thing with penalties. Anytime you're having a penalty, you're going to flip it. You're going to have, if you're making an attack, that's a minus penalty. If you're making a check, that's a plus penalty. And so you have to be able to flip that. And then you have your edges and your snags. Now, what are the different types of checks and contests? And I thought there's some really cool concepts here, right? And I'm probably going to flip back and forth between this and my notes in just a second, because when you're making a contest, that is an opposed roll, right? Where you and I we're fighting, we're wrestling, so we're both using our might, and what happens is we both roll our might score, and if I pass and you fail, guess what? I just won the contest. If you pass and I fail, you won it. But if we both pass, now there's this sort of like, if we both passed, who technically won? And that's where this comes in here, right? So I'll highlight it right there. So if one of us happened to get a special success, meaning we hit our might, that person's the winner. if one of us, if that's not the case, then the next one is, did either of us have an edge? Whoever had the edge, that person's the winner. Who had the largest bonus? If that's so, it's this sort of like, if you've ever looked at like who makes the playoffs in NFL football, that's sort of what we're looking at here, right? It's a consistent tiebreaker. Like, this is the chance of the tiebreaker. It's this one. If it's not that, then it's this one. There's not this. Blah, 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 down the list. I'd be curious how much this comes into play. I would hate it if it came in often. Hopefully, you don't have to realize down here these bullets, right? Because if you're going down there, then that was a crazy situation. But this might not come into play very often. The other thing I think is really cool is this idea. This one I thought was really neat because I am interested in thinking about this a little bit more. Is this idea of a linked contest, right? So linked contests, I think of as, it's not just a it's almost, I don't know if it's not a skill check, right? Like it's not a skill contest or whatever you call them back in the day, but it's in essence, if you have you and the enemy or you and someone else are in a contest that you think as a GM that it is a struggle, it's going to be a struggle for a little while potentially, right? Maybe it's a race. Maybe that would be a good example of this. Like if you're trying to make it a little bit more theater of the mind racing, like you and someone else are running down or racing down some sort of alleyway or whatever. But in essence, what it is that whoever can win 2 turns in a row in contested roles. So it pretty much means that every round or every turn, you're making a contested roll. And until someone either gets 2 wins in a row or someone gets a special success for the first one or for, individually, that then determines who won this linked contest. I thought that was just a really interesting concept, right? An interesting way mechanically of solving these sort of contests that linger on a little bit longer than you might anticipate. So that was kind of cool. Let me go into now, I want to go into classes and sort of character design, because that's what I normally go into. And so I'm just going to go through my notes so I'm not flipping around through the book a ton. But in essence, you have callings, right? So your class is your calling. And this is the first, this is out of order of how I normally list these out, but this is how the game walks you through it, right? So you have your callings, and they kind of break them down into these 3 categories. You have magic users, combat, and you have stealth, right? Those are the 3 types of callings. And then there's a ton of different, like, specific callings, like the factotum, the sneak, the champion, the raider, etc. Battle princess and the murder princess. I thought those were hilarious. Right? And your calling, what it's going to do is it's going to determine a lot of things, right? So here's an image of, they have these great little, it's almost video gamey in a way, right? Where they have these little images that show you like an infograph, right? And here, I'll make it bigger. Right? And what this is going to do is it's going to determine your starting aptitudes, right? So here are your 5 aptitudes. So that's determined. You've got this visual bar just for the heck of it, which is pretty cool because it shows you 10 is max. It's going to give you some sort of combat stat. You get +1. It's going to give you your hearts. Your hearts are your health. We'll talk about health in a while. It gives you your defense and your speed. And then it's going to tell you what are some of your potential, like, starting abilities and powers. The other thing this does, which is kind of cool, is I'll see if I can flip to it super quick in my book so I don't have to go to the page, is that every calling, once again, it's about this layout, right? It's about this really interesting layout and how they visualize things. But like, here's an example of what starting equipment is available to you, right? So it's all these little bubbles, and it's showing this person has access to every type of armor, but only one type of melee weapon. And then that's the leveling progression there. But it's these quick infographics. It takes up a whole page to tell you that, but it's kind of nice. It's kind of nice. So that's what your calling does. It's going to give you some starting abilities, and it's going to give you, it's going to determine your attributes. It's going to determine your health. It's going to determine your speed, etc. The next thing you do is you're going to choose your ancestry. And the ancestry, well, in this game, it's called a species. It's also going to grant some, once again, let me make this bigger. It's also going to grant some some abilities, right? So it's going to give you your size, and your size also is going to determine how much you carry. And then it's going to give you some abilities and potentially where your home world is, or some sort of like quirks, like where you're going to be getting quirks from. There's a lot of different ones. I thought this was cool because the world is supposed to be this. There's a lot in terms of the world, and I would watch Dave Themator's video on that. He goes into a lot of details, but I picked this class because this is a dimensional stray. That the world itself is sort of like a mix of different dimensions, and this is pretty much someone from Earth, right? So someone who, this could be you. If you wanted to play you, this could be you, a dimensional stray coming into it. Otherwise, you have biomechnoids, these little chibs, which is like the chibi art. All sorts of different stuff, right? Pretty cool. Finally, you get into your aptitudes. These are your actual abilities. I'm sorry, I put attributes, but they're called aptitudes, where you have might, deft, grit, instinct, aura. When you're choosing these, you get to boost 2 of them, right? So you get to just choose. I'm going to have, they say roll it, right? You randomly roll it. So it's like there's a table, and you roll on the table twice, and then what happens is your might goes up 1 and your insight goes up 1, great, and then you roll on another table to reduce one of them. So you're randomizing this stat block, right? So you had this initial stat block that is determined by your class, and then 2 of them are going to go up, or 1 goes up twice, and then 1 of them is going to go down, and then that ends up with that's your actual stats. Then you have some sort of quirk, and these quirks are really fun. And if I recall correctly, there's a lot of like linking of things, meaning it's like if you're from this home world or this region, here are a bunch of professions or a bunch of quirks that might fit with that, and there's tons of them, right? So they give you a lot of options, and there's a lot of sort of linking. And these quirks, once again, they give you an advantage and a disadvantage. So it's almost like edges and hindrances in Savage Worlds. You get something that gives you a little boost, and get something that gives you a little ding, right? There's no skills in this game. Skills are all just your attributes. And then here's your background. Your background, you pick a homeland, and then based on the homeland, this is where it's going to then give you maybe some starting items, some specialty items, and then immediately it says, okay, well, if that's your homeland, now here are some different histories that you could have. I'll take you to the book just because, once again, I think it's pretty cool. Let's go flying over to Homelands and Histories 108. So that's the crazy thing, is this game is big, right? Like this, the character creation part, I should say, is wild. And there's a lot more to the book itself that's pretty cool. But so this goes through your languages. This is showing that if you chose Wistful Dark Histories, that might be the area. Let me double check this so we can get this accurate. But if I recall, there was a choosing of homelands, and depending on which homeland you chose, you then could have different. Here's your homelands tables. Okay, so here it is. The Wistful Dark is this area. So this is an actual homeland. You're from the Wistful Dark. You get these bonus languages, and then you go to the Wistful Dark, and now here are all the different Wistful Dark histories, right? Meaning that you were a town guard, right? So now we'll just go to town guard, 15 to 16. Town guard, probably skipped it. Nope, there it is. Now the town guard has these abilities, right? Seeing the truth in the situation, throwing your weight around, so each of these little purviews are little abilities, potentially. And then each of these starting gear, here's some starting gear that you have, right? So this is crazy, right? There's a lot of, in other words, there's a lot of depth, right? Meaning that there's a lot of building blocks that you can play with as somebody who likes to create characters, where you can just kind of link a lot of stuff together. Now, one of the things I'm not going to go into here is equipment, because this is definitely a game where it talks about slots and equipment slots. So I'll just put it out there in that sense, that there are equipment slots. I am not one who usually is a gamer who goes through all the whole sort of equipment slot carrying thing. That's just not the game that I grew up in, so it's not something that gets me pumped. But if you're interested in that, look it up. But it's pretty cool. What I will do is talk about abilities and sort of when you have these characters and you have these starting abilities. This I thought was kind of cool too, is that every ability has ranks, and those ranks, meaning that here I have combat momentum. Rank 1 is when I'm in essence first level, but that ability is going to rank up, right? And there's a lot of abilities that have ranks like this, where it's like you get to a certain level, I believe, and then all of a sudden you rank up in that ability. Now that ability gets better. So that's nice, right? It's kind of cool to have that kind of flavor to it. All right, let's go back down to let me just double check if there's one more thing I need to think about in this. We'll go over here to gear real quick because I just want to peek at this. Here is an example of gear, and what's neat about this in terms of weapons in particular is that they have these weapon categories. So they're not saying, oh, you have to use a battle axe per se, but you could be trained in mighty, right? And so mighty weapons are different than other weapons. And when you're trained in mighty weapons, now you have, these are some extra sort of features or abilities or flavors for that mighty weapon, right? So I think that's pretty neat, right? And there are ways that you can end up doing extra damage or extra abilities based on having these different sort of weapons that you're kind of quote unquote specialized in, right? Now let's go back to the quick guides. All right. I'm not going to go through journeys, but I want to just point out that this game has a lot. This game has a lot going on in terms of there's a lot mechanically going on. They have a whole section on journeys, right? What does it take to camp? What does it take to rush? How do you go over terrain, et cetera, et cetera? They have a whole section on exploration, different roles for positions for the PCs and different movement types and et cetera. So this stuff is, I think this is pretty cool, right? And they even go through a whole section on like moving through maps and how to navigate maps. And there's different types of routes. You have, in essence, sort of like known routes versus unknown paths, and that changes the speed. And so if you have a crunchy group that likes to go through that sort of level of detail for your exploration and your journey, your overall sort of journey. So here it is, routes. You have paths and roads and rivers, etc. Awesome, right? You can chew on I think that you can get as deep or as chew on this as much as you like, right? Negotiate. This was an interesting concept, in essence. That besides draw steel, I haven't seen a lot of games that are trying to mechanize negotiation. And so there's differences between if you're trying to negotiate one-on-one versus groups, and there's different sort of like bonuses and pluses and minuses, the kind of thing you see like in Pathfinder, where you get a lot of this adds this much, this adds this much, etc. So what are the things I thought was really cool? The main thing I thought was really cool is I love this, right? Where you can try to in essence, you're trying to choose the tactic of your negotiation, and you're saying, I'm going to try and intimidate them, right? And that means that you're going to use your might versus their grit, but you might not know where their grit is. But based on the feel, the vibe you're getting off that person, you're thinking like, I don't think this person's very gritty, right? And so you're trying to push, right? Versus, and I just like this idea that I'm going to have a reasoned debate, meaning that I've got really good insight, and I'm hoping their insight's not that great, and my goal is to have a reasoned debate. And then here are the factors, and these probably are. Knowing this game, they're probably mechanized, but I like the idea of just seeing that these are factors so that the players could say, oh, I'm going to show that evidence, and then the GM determines, okay, that's going to give +2, that's going to give +4, etc. And then you make your normal contested roll, where you both roll a d20, and it's who rolls, you're both trying to get that success, and if you succeed, did you have an edge? Did you get a super success? What do they call it? Etc. So I think that's pretty cool. Here's the rules over here for if you're trying to do group dynamics. I didn't go into those, but I thought the other thing that was nice is that they talk about you can push, which means that if you fail the first time, you get a second try, right? And then there's some sort of effects if you fail the second time. All right, fighting. So when we get into fighting, the big thing I want to point out is that one, the mechanic changes, right? Now we're doing a d20 over, and you're trying to get a d20 over the enemy, all right? Health is simple. Health in this game is your enemy has X amount of hearts. If you roll a d20 and you succeed over their defense, most weapons do 1 heart. But what's really cool is that there is a number for every weapon that if you hit that number or higher, that means you're going to do an extra heart, right? So it's like a crit, right? But it's like, I'd have to remember it, but it's, say like a battle axe has like a 22, and I forget what the number is specifically called, but if you hit that number, it's extra damage. It might be the extra damage number. It might be that sort of simple. But you're doing hearts. You do 1 heart versus 2 hearts. Maybe you use an ability to try and do more hearts, etc. Okay? Now, when it comes to areas, what I think is neat about this is a game that, I've tried to do zones in the past, to some success and some unsuccess, some failure. But this game does zones, and they call them battlefield areas. And you've got a lot of battlefield areas, and the GM can have as many as they want, and they can set limits to how many people can be in those battlefield areas, etc. What I thought was cool about this game that I didn't think about when I was using it is that typically when I use zones, I was saying, hey, I want the game to feel simpler. And so all my rules got simpler, meaning that you had an attack and a move. And the move just meant you move 1 zone. Well, this game decided, you know what? Depending on your speed, you might move more zones or areas than other people. So if you are slow, if you are wearing a ton of armor, for instance, making yourself super heavy, that means you have to burn your action. So you get 1 move and an action, but you can burn your action to get a second move. And when you have 0 move, that means you have to double move, right, to get there. So that means that if you're in full armor and you're trying to go from one area, one zone to another zone, that's your entire action. But if you're super fast, you can move 2. So you can really kite the hell out of someone, technically, if you know that they're super heavy. So that's pretty cool. I like this idea of, 1, movement now is a major factor in the zones. It's a little bit differently, but it's still super simple, meaning that your movement is not 35 feet. It's 2 areas, right? It's just your speed. Your speed is 2, right? Or something like that, which is, or no, not your speed. Sorry, your move is 2. Speed is different. Here's the other thing I thought was cool. They talked about, well, let's give areas conditions, and they mechanized it, which I think a lot of us would think about these, but they really put in a lot of consideration in terms of the mechanics. So for instance, sheltered attacks from outside suffer snags. So if you're sheltered, things have disadvantage. Things have disadvantage attacking you with range. If it's precarious, you have to make a def check on your turn, every turn, meaning that you're trying to use your agility or dexterity to not fall, or else you're going to topple. There was another one. Oh, isolated. Extra move required to enter. So isolated would be things like maybe it's like a balcony that's up above. So it's an isolated position that you have to climb up onto to get to. Cramped would be a really small location. So this one, no, you can't use your speed rating to add to your defensive bonus anymore. So that's kind of cool. So you have to rely just on your armor because it's cramped. So I like these. I think they give a little bit of context. Now, you run into that issue potentially of there's a lot of rules. You got to hold all these rules in your brain potentially, or hopefully you just have these cheat sheets on the table for people to use. Action economy, you have 1 action, you have a move. We already kind of talked about that to a degree, but here are the different actions. So they kind of bucket them into different categories. Here's your just normal attack, or you can defend yourself. Here are different tactical actions, right? You can react, use ability, get that extra move, which is what the super heavy's got to do. Aid, flee, blah, blah, blah. Flee is a cool one because this, in essence, is, as a group, you can all decide to take your flee action. And if you all take the flee action, that means you all leave the combat, right? Like you're ending the encounter. And I think that the way initiative works in this game, just so that we can talk that all through, is that it's side-based initiative, where it's you're all going to go and then the enemy's all going to go. And you're going to go back and forth. But who goes first is first determined thematically. So in essence, whoever attacked first goes first. But if it's not making sense in terms of, well, I don't know who actually went first. Then you make a def check, and that's this sort of up here. You have team 1 declares the fight, so technically they would go first. But was it an ambush? All right, well, then make a deft contest where it's, in essence, the person who has the highest deft on one side versus the highest deft on the other side. That then determines who goes first. Now you determine the battlefield. What's it look like? Now team 1 goes, team 2 goes, repeat, repeat, repeat. You kind of go through. Down here is just looking at your defensive rating. So you're larger, you're easier to hit, so your number's lower. But in essence, it's sort of adding this up. You have your size, then you add on your armor, then you add on shields, and you add on speed. Your speed is reduced depending on armor, so then you don't get those bonuses. Shields give you like 1 parry and encounter. It's like you get the bonus to defense all the time, but then you get this special action of you can parry and attack once like an encounter, something along those lines, which I thought was interesting. And then finally we get into damage, right? And I think this is pretty. Oh well, here's that extra damage number. So cool. So here's the weapon. So you've got a let's go to that mighty weapon. Here's your mighty weapon. If you get a 20 or higher, you're doing an extra heart, and it already does 2 hearts. So now you're doing 3 hearts. It's pretty cool, right? So if you get a 20 or higher with that, boom, 3 hearts dead, or maybe dead. I don't know. But these are the categories of weapons. And I like a lot of these categories. I think this is kind of cool, right? I like this idea of you just have these categorical representations of weapons, and then maybe the individual weapons in the game, we'd have to look, have little interesting takes. This injury table is the thing I was going to mention that I think is really neat. So you might have like 2 hearts or 3 hearts as a hero, which means that you're going to take 3 hits technically, and then you're out of hearts. But it doesn't mean you're out of hit points. It doesn't mean you're knocked out. What it means is now you can be injured. So in essence, in this game, you get 3 hits, and then once you've been hit 3 times, now the next time you're hit, or I should say you have 3 hearts, because if you get hit by an attack that does 2 hearts, you're in trouble. But the next time you would take a heart and you can't, you roll on the injury table. And then you roll, and you're going to find out, okay, what did I get? What happened to me? The second time you get an injury, you get a worse injury, right? And then the third time you get a worse injury. So it looks like, this, for instance, miss a turn, getting shocked or stalled, more likely to happen as a first injury. Very low likely if it's your third injury. But you can see down here, death, quiet death, that can only happen if it's your third injury, etc. Right? So, in those injuries, you need to take downtime actions you need to rest and take these downtime actions in order to kind of get rid of them. Because unfortunately, those linger. You can gain hearts back. All your hearts come back. The second that encounter's over, the next encounter, you've got all your hearts again. But if you have an injury, that injury is lingering. And those injuries can be a real, pain in the butt. So here's let's skip down. Let's see if we can do some other things that were of interest to moi. Ailments, nope. Downtime. Once again, I love looking at this kind of stuff. I don't use it a ton because sometimes I feel like when I'm in a game, we've only got like 2 hours. So we're spending it in the action. And then we're not doing a ton in between sessions because we've got all kinds of life responsibilities and kids and things of that nature. So it's like when I'm contacting my buddies, it's more, when are we going to play again? Not, what are you currently doing in your downtime? And we don't have time to get into the downtime usually when we're playing. But it doesn't mean I don't love it and that I wish I had it. So some of the things I wish I had was, like this has mechanics for reputation management. So you're trying to build up your reputation potentially. I think that's cool. Healing, this is where you're trying to get rid of an injury. Crafting, there's a huge crafting mechanics in this game. And if anyone wants me to go into more of these mechanics, shoot comments. I'm trying to hit the big game and big generalities at first, but if you have needs for any of those sort of mechanics, please let me know. So there was another thing in here I wanted to really pull out. Oh, companions. So, being a sort of Japanese anime style of game, there are pets and companions that you can have. And what I think is interesting about it is they can die just like they can be attacked, but they don't have actions per se themselves, right? They have just assist actions or things of that nature. So they assist you and they help you and they aid you during combat. and they can carry things, because there's the idea that there's limitations in how much you can carry. So you can use them for carrying, you can use them for things like that. But one of the things you can do during downtime is you can train them up. You can make your companions better. You can make them more skilled. You can bond with other animals. So maybe this is where you're trying to tame an animal. So there's a lot going on. Okay, let me pull up one last thing, and I'll be able to see if there's any particular other notes that I wanted to get into that I thought were pretty cool about this. So we went through battlefield and positioning, which I thought was cool. There's the combat assistance, that's in essence what your pets are going to do. And they might have other things they have things like combat tricks, and they have other abilities like that. There are interesting things where it's like if you use the same trick too often against an enemy, meaning if you use the same trick twice against an enemy, the second time you use it, it's going to be a snag, so it's at disadvantage. These are like these custom things and these tricks. Anytime you use the same custom action on an enemy twice in a row, now you're doing it at a disadvantage because they're learning, right? They're learning. They're saying, oh, I know what you're trying to do here. Oh, there's colossal combat. They go through the idea of like if you're fighting a kaiju, and they pretty much just break that into battlefield areas where every region of the monster is a battlefield area. And each battlefield area has its own strike points, and those strike points have hearts, and you're trying to get to what would be considered the core point. And the core point, if you can get rid of all the hearts in the core point, it's dead. But odds are, my assumption is that you're going to be moving through different strike points, or we got to disable the leg, and now we can get finally to the neck, and etc. And it can do sort of sweep actions or sweeping attacks that I believe attack everything in a particular battlefield. And I think that they also have these repulsive attacks where they knock you off, or they try and knock you from region to region. I love stuff like that. Like that's the kind of thing that I get really into. It talks about different monster types. You have mooks, bosses, and mega bosses, and then you have the colossus. There's not a lot of differences in terms of monsters versus players, meaning they have hearts and they have defensive stats, etc. There are, let's see. Yeah, I think those were the main things to me that were so, engaging, and that should hit all the main highlights as well. To me, the things I thought were, we'll say advancement real quick. There is a leveling, obviously there's leveling in this game, and they kind of break it down into 1 XP, 2 XP, or 3 XP. 1 XP is like, if you just engaged in playing, you're going to get, I think you get like 1 XP for every hour you play. And then they have these achievements that are based on what are the kind of things you did. Did you defeat an enemy? Did you convert a hated enemy into an ally? Did you accomplish a goal with a weird creative solution? All of these things end up being some sort of variation between 1, 2, or 3 XP. But I thought it was interesting to have you're going to get 1 XP for every hour of the game time, real game time that you play. I thought that was pretty cool. There's so many things in this game. The last thing that I didn't have time to dive into, but is probably the thing that I also am very interested in. I should have dove into this. You know what? We're going to go real time here. Real time. So there is this concept in this game, apparently, of bright versus dark allegiance. And there's like allegiance points. And I think it only happens with casters, with certain types of casters. And the idea being that as you use abilities, I assume, or as you get XP, maybe you can choose to rank up allegiance towards either bright or dark. And depending on if you have bright or dark, you have different types of allegiance, which means you get different types of gifts or powers, and then you have different sort of social bonds, I assume. So let's see if we can find that real quick. I know this is no longer a standard video where now I'm just exploring things for the hell of it. But I really want to know what that's like, because the first thing it kind of makes me feel, and I was a little disappointed once I found out that it was for just particular classes, because at first I was thinking, oh, this is like Crown and Skull. Maybe we have that moment where you're supposed to choose. We do this crown or do we do the skull, right? But now If it's one class, that's still really cool, but it's very different. And you can see how evocative this game is. It's really pretty. Look at this. There's a sword gun, right? These kind of things are, there's so many cool things in this game. Every class is pretty neat. It's just a question of, do you like how you interact with the mechanics, right? Like if the mechanics interaction aren't exciting to you for whatever reason, like, or if there's just too much, if there's just too much game here and it's hard for you to just pick and choose and say, you know what, I'm not going to care about crafting. If you're the kind of person that's like, no, I got to do it all or none of it, then it might be tough for you. All right, Murder Princess, you think would have something about dark and bright. All right, let's see if there's anything that pops out in terms of allegiance. Oh, here we go. If you did Frostblade, you get gain 1 dark allegiance point, right? So where the hell does, and all of these say dark allegiance points. So this class apparently does not have a bright allegiance. So maybe it's just certain classes, if you choose certain abilities, you're going to be dark allegiance. So now we got to do the whole searchy search. Allegiance. Allegiance. My search function's not working. You know where we go? This game, I believe, has a beautiful, oh, that's a fun little ending. I believe this game has a wonderful index, which is another thing that when we talk about the book design, and I'm going to mention something about the book design in just a second, that I think is fantastic, is that it's, the back of the book is fabulous. Isn't this riveting YouTube channel content? Looking at me scroll through an appendix? Man, you guys are so lucky. This is gorgeous. Right? You don't get this kind of content on other channels. Allegiance, 206. Boom. All right. Those who dabble with magic may end up with an allegiance to either the invincible bright or the profound dark. Having allegiance will change the way some magic and creatures interact with you. Okay. You start with 0. If you take a magical ability that gives you a dark versus a bright, then you rank one way or the other. Determining your allegiance, if you have a dark allegiance, if you have 2 more points in dark than bright, then you're dark. Opposite, twilight. Ooh, you're twilight. You have neither allegiance points exceeds by 2. And then if you're unaligned, if you have 1 or more allegiance points. If you have 1 or less. So you start off unaligned most likely. And so then, okay. So once you have a bright, once you get to being accruing 3 bright allegiance points, results in a bright gift. And so you just, oh, look at that. You get a halo. You get a resonating voice. You can shout. Oh, this is cool. Okay, so it gives you some, oh my gosh, lots of stuff, of course. Whereas if you're dark, you have fangs and you have bone spikes and raptor talons. Okay, so it gives you flavor. Does it give you anything else? That's it. Which is still cool, right? It gives you flavor because it's going to be that the GM now determines how people interact with you. But it just gives you, so it's just cosmetic. It's cosmetic and potentially story hooks, which, once again, this game goes through a lot of work to give you some of those things. So it's an interesting game because you have a lot of mechanical crunch, and then you have some, once again, you have a lot of, I don't want to say flavor bloat because I don't think it's bloat. I think it's flavor options, right? You have a lot of flavor options that you can use if you want. You have a lot of mechanics that are pretty dense. And so there's a lot. I can say this game is a lot. Now, what do I think about this layout? What do I think of this book that everyone was kind of gushing over? I think it's gorgeous. I think it's a gorgeous book, but I will tell you that the first time I opened this book and was flipping through some of these pages, it was a little overwhelming. Like there's almost something about all of the constant iconography and bubbles and boxes and whatnot that at first was almost like, at my first take was I felt like the PDF, that it was almost a game designed for the PDF. Like the PDF felt good because it was, I'm not that old, but the idea that like it just made better sense in terms of it being differentiated. And this book, when I look in it, sometimes it feels super busy on pages, but I will say that it is beautiful. And I love the sort of side margins and the top margins for guiding you along where you are. And the idea of the D20 roll on the left side, really cool idea conceptually. So overall, I'm really happy I have this book because I do think it is a testament to sort of design. But there are definitely moments where I'm looking through it and I'm just like, wow, there's a lot of stuff on this page. So that would be my take on it. So that is Break. I think this game's got so much going for it. I think that if we talk about the concept of stealing mechanics, I love the idea of, I at least want to explore the idea of the, I'm going to explore the idea of battlefields again, the zones, battlefields, and the sort of like tags that are associated with battlefield areas. I like that. I thought that was nice to think mechanically, just tagging it and coming up with very thematic tags and then putting the mechanics underneath that. I thought that was cool. I like the idea of a linked contest. I'll have to think about that in terms of what does that mean to me, having the linked contests to sort of expand to contests. I liked the negotiation tactic where it's like, I'm going to choose to be intimidating, which that actually mechanically means it's my might versus their grit. Like, that's cool. I really also liked the injuries. I liked the idea that you had 3 hearts, and then after your 3 hearts, that's when you accrued an injury, and the injury was going to be somewhere sort of random based on the table. So those are the things that probably to me stuck out the most. Do I love the character design? Yeah, I love it. I love all that stuff. I love the weapons. I love the character designs. I love the weapon like categories. All of that's great, right? Because that's flavor. But those to me, some of those things have been done in other games, and so I think they do it really well. But those aren't the things that stick out to me as much as this sort of concept of the ones I just listed out. Those are the ones I'm interested in sort of like mulling over and thinking about how would those fit into a game for me, the type of game that I usually run or play. So that's it. That's the video. It only took, holy crap, 40 minutes. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.